With no further ado, let me kickstart this session by welcoming and introducing our distinguished speaker for this evening, Mr. SaiSatish Vedam. Mr. SaiSatish is a product leader with extensive hands-on experience in building and bringing disruptive technology products to the market. He has worn many hats during his career, all the way from programmer, designer, architect, analyst manager to a chief strategist for global products in large corporations. He was most recently the senior director of product management at Oracle. He is also an executive coach and senior faculty member of the Institute of Product Leadership. Pleased to welcome you tonight, Sai.
Thank you, Harleen. Good evening, everyone. Is there a way, Harleen, for them to turn on the cameras and unmute themselves?
Unfortunately not, but if someone does, if they raise their hand, I can unmute them.
Great.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for that. And I know it's a bit late. I'm sure it's dinner time for many of you, but I'm glad to see so many of you join, which only indicates that there is that seriousness, determination, and commitment to change or to transition your careers from whichever your role you are in into product management role. So, here's what I'll do. I don't know where you guys are joining from, but today I think it was a joy to be on Bangalore roads, right? You don't get to see this situation very often, even better than Sundays. And so I'm actually in a good mood. Right. Once after coming back from work, it's actually a pleasant drive to do that. Now, here's what I'm going to do. As Harleen said, this is an Ask Me Anything session, right? Which means you have some specific questions in your context that you may want to hear some perspectives. And I'm happy to take that. But I will provide perspectives from three different experiences, right? One, my own career journey into product management and product leadership from engineering roles. Second, I have been a hiring manager for many years. I've hired dozens of product managers in my career, so I'll bring a hiring manager's perspective. And third, I'm also a product coach, and I coach dozens and I've coached hundreds of people, helping them transition their careers. So I'll bring some of those insights, what worked, what did not work, and what are the best practices and how can that happen, right? So those are the three experiences that I'll share with all of you. But before I start talking about a few topics that I have, I'd love to know if you guys have any questions to begin with. Let's see, and then see if we're going to cover that in the topics that I will also talk about. So I have 10 years. I see a couple of questions already on chat. Please go ahead and post it. I know, as I said, it's probably dinner time, and whether it is good or bad, you can't turn on the video cameras right now. So go ahead and type in them at least. It's always a very strange feeling to talk to people. In fact, talking to a green camera instead of seeing faces, right? So, but it is what it is, and we'll continue with that. So I see a couple of questions, 10 years, non-IT manager, how this program will help me in building career in product management. So I don't know what program that you are referring to. We can certainly address that towards the end. But my main focus for this discussion is independent of any programs or anything that you want to do, right? So give you a better sense of a path, if you will, a path that I have seen work for hundreds of people that they have taken, that you can also take and see how you can transition, right? I'm not trivializing it. I'm not saying it is easy, but there are patterns that emerge, and I'll try and bring those patterns to you, right? So that question was from Ajay. Couple of other questions. 6.5 years experience, different domains, switch to core product manager role, and I want to advance deeper into product management role. Okay, good. And which courses? Again, I'll help you understand with what do we mean by advance into different roles, and what is required, what is the expectations from the organizations, from your product leaders about what you would do, and then we can talk about what might be the right thing for you. Can we really get started in product management after doing BPA? Now, that's a very interesting question. Usually, there are two streams where people actually get into product management, right? So people with a little bit of work experience, at least I would say 2 years, 3 years, in any role, it's fine, right? And a keen interest, passion, curiosity, commitment to get into product roles. And of course, you have to do some hard work to demonstrate to people that you can actually do that. And then get into an entry-level role called associate product manager, right? Lots of companies are opening up this role called APMs. Or I've also seen post-graduation in business and management, right? I think in my experience, an undergraduate without work experience is going to be a very difficult thing. And you'll see why it's difficult, because product management in many, many organizations is a very strategic role. And hence, the hiring managers come with a certain level of risk appetite. And hence, they are looking at the candidates with certain qualities and capabilities and competencies while they are evaluating, right? So you stay tuned for those things and see what might be needed. Okay, good. I think I met you when, okay, good. Pratiksha, looks like we met before. Thanks for being here again. Good to say hi. 15 years in mechanical engineering, project management. Okay, good. Project management. How do I transition into digital product management? Good. So that's basically the crux of what we are going to talk. Whether you are from project management, whether you are from design, whether you are from engineering, whether you are from program management, whether you are from marketing, and I've seen people transition from all these roles, right? Whether it is from technology industry and non-technology industry. Of course, the nuances are different, but there is a well laid out approach that you can start going ahead with it. One thing I want to caution to people is don't fall into this trap that if you get a 3-letter degree, if you do a 4-letter certification, you will automatically get into product management, right? So I think that's a myth. It doesn't matter where you do the program, whether it is IPL or somewhere else. Now, you will get probably 5 extra points. As a hiring manager, I'll tell you, you'll probably get 5 extra points because you have demonstrated some commitment, some seriousness that you want to actually move into that. But that is not something, a determining factor for anybody to say, okay, now you are ready for this role, right? So this is a important aspect to remember. And of course, these programs or these courses helps you in many different ways, right? Not just about getting some logo and getting some certificate and going and showing it to people. That's not necessarily how product management hiring happens, right? So good. How can you have an MVP product design for a very mature? So Chirashri, this is a very product specific question. I would love to address that. In fact, I teach value proposition design in the executive MBA, and I spent one whole day on MVPs, right? And how do you think about MVPs? How do you define MVPs? How do you experiment, create experiments and do that? But we'll try and address that if you have time towards the end, right? So let's focus on the today's context, and today's context is mainly, many of you who are coming from different functional roles and probably have interest in getting into product management, irrespective of the industry, irrespective of the number of years of experience. I'll try and outline a path towards this, right? Poonam, 10 years experience in banking sales, does it work? Well, that's a very that's inadequate information to give you a yes or no answer. But maybe if you stick around and we go through and we'll cover all of these things, it is independent of roles, right? So what we are going to talk about, what I'll spend some time is independent of roles. And then if you have further information about your role and what type of company, what type of products, what type of industry you want to be in, we can absolutely take that, right? Today, by the way, number one industry that is hiring product managers is actually financial services, right? Fintech, number one within that, and core banking, number two. So product management is a very, very pervasive role in financial services industry as well. Okay, good. So Let me take one more. I think most of these, the ones that I'm skipping, it's not that it is not important, it's absolutely important. I'm scanning through and seeing that whether that is in the scope of what I want to share some perspectives. If it is, I'm skipping that. And if you believe that that is not yet answered, we can spend last 10 minutes on that as well, right? How much time should I expect to, I think Nishant is asking how much time should I expect to transition into product management and which role should I expect? Now, it's highly relative. It really depends on where you are right now, what context you are in, what experience you have, what domain you have, and where you want to move to, right? So for people, let's say, who have like 5 years, 10 years, or just like you, 9 years experience in, let's say, manufacturing or IT services or IT technology building, like you said. Now, IT is not a domain, right? There are vertical industries and there are horizontal. So domain knowledge is absolutely valued if you want to move into that same industry or same domain. So you can leverage that part of it. If you don't have it, and if you want to move to, let's say, e-commerce industry, or if you want to move to electrical vehicles, or if you want to go to consumer goods, FMCG, now it would take some time for you to convince the other side that you actually have that domain understanding and the industry understanding, right? So that's going to be a key factor that determines the duration that it will take. I have seen people who make this transition within weeks, and I have seen people who took 2 years to make that transition. So there are multiple factors that come into it, which I'll also outline some of those. Okay, good. Retail sector. I think now I'm seeing questions that talk about is product management in this sector, in that sector. Now, different industries actually call this slightly differently. In fact, within a particular industry, they are called different titles, which is very interesting, right? In India, we have very creative titles. So hence my focus when I talk about product management or a product manager is not about a title, right? It is about role and responsibilities. And some companies call them, in fact, Microsoft calls product managers as program managers, right? There was recently, I got a call from one of the IPL alumni who I had coached saying that, sir, I've actually gotten into a requirement scientist role, right? Now that's very interesting, requirement scientist. And most of the companies today who had business analysts are now being called as product owners, right? So titles are very creative. Different companies are giving different titles, discretionary titles, to attract a lot of people to that particular role. But in my understanding, and I work with lots of executives, lots of hiring managers, and working professionals across the industries, this role is absolutely there. In fact, I know several people who play this role very crucially in two-wheeler segment, right? Automotive two-wheelers. In Tesco, retail stores like Walmart and Tesco, Walmart in Bangalore has a huge setup, and there are lots and lots of product managers there. And those product managers are not necessarily all of them have IT background or engineering background. They actually bring that retail industry understanding and experience, customer behavior, customer insighting, and those things, right? So Vivek, hopefully that answered your question. Okay, so again, I think what we will do is I'll try to spend some time on specific topics which I believe will address most of the questions that you have. But if you still have anything else unanswered, then I'm happy to spend more time, right? Provided you guys can stick around, around 9:30 or post 9:30. So these are the 5 things that I want to spend some time. Number one, how do we, what are product careers, and why is there suddenly so much interest in product management? Now, when I say suddenly, it's relative, right? I have been a product manager and a product leader for about 15 years. When I actually moved into product management, it was an unknown area, right? Especially in India, except very few multinational companies, it was completely unknown. And some of us at that time thought that India and the Indian IT ecosystem are actually going to create products not just to solve local problems, but also global problems. And hence, there's going to be a lot of demand for people with product management skills and competencies. Now, my estimate at that time was it would take about 6 to 7 years, but I was pleasantly surprised. It took off very quickly. and it's one of the fastest growing career paths today, right? So I'll spend a minute on that. And I also want to give you a very different understanding of roles and responsibilities, how to think about it, right? And the third point is very important, right? I know a lot of people want to get into product management role. And to me, it's one of the most exciting roles. It's probably one of the most gratifying, satisfying roles, but it has certain downsides, right? It is very challenging. And I'll talk about a few things that you should consider in your career if that is something that you're okay with, right? And then fourth one, as I mentioned, I'll bring some hiring manager perspective, right? If I'm hiring for product managers at different levels, I've even hired directors and senior directors before. So at different levels, the expectations are different, but in general, there are certain common aspects that we use to evaluate. I'll bring that part of it. And then finally, a path, right? All of this is good, but how will you actually go about doing it in a step-by-step way, right? So I'll give you kind of a prescriptive way of doing this, not a formula. And by the way, prescriptive way doesn't mean it's easier, right? It's just that there is clarity in how to get there. And this clarity, as I mentioned, I'll share with you based on hundreds of coaching sessions that I've done with many people who are moving into this role. So let's get into it. I want to spend a minute or two on product careers. Right now, you're all here obviously because product management is a fascinating area. Now, if you look at some data, which is obviously corroborating the trends, the desires, the aspirations of the people that we are seeing, it's actually one of the fastest growing career paths in this market, right? Not only in India, but in the US, in the Europe, it is one of the fastest growing. And this actually came up from a recent report from LinkedIn based on hiring patterns that they are seeing. Now, if you look at it, about 60% of the companies, all companies are hiring one or more product managers. Now, that's a very good sign of companies recognizing the value and importance of having this role, whether they are creating technology products or other offerings to that market, right? And I'm not talking about the services industry. I'm talking more about the products and offerings that are, provided or launched or made available to a large groups of customers, right? So, and that is really important. In fact, 2 days ago, in one of the coaching sessions, I heard this participant mention that he's actually moving from hospitals. So this person spent 12 years in hospital industry, in healthcare, especially hospitals, moving into a fertility clinic, which is hiring product managers, right? Now that's really interesting and fascinating. So it is absolutely the fastest, one of the fastest growing roles. Now, not only that, there is enough evidence now that these are very high paying roles, right? Well, how high paying is actually pretty interesting that the growth in the salary is also not linear, right? At a certain level, it jumps dramatically, right? So if you look at the mean and median pay in Indian rupees, here lakhs per annum, you will see a huge difference from senior product manager onwards, right? Now, I'm using the titles here, not necessarily the role and responsibilities. If you see chief product officer, it's actually pretty low compared to vice president, and that's because there was not enough data about it, right? So, but several CPOs, especially in the technology companies, I know the average salaries is more than 3 crores, right? So it's off the charts. But what is more interesting is in these difficult times, right, economically challenging times, and I have seen this, I've noticed this as part of coaching. Also, the career club at the institute, 8 companies on an average come to hire for a variety of roles in product management. You could see that the companies are, number one, still continue to hire. Number two, people who are in product management role are 150 times or 150% more likely to get promoted compared to any other role. So it is also faster growing path. And I've experienced this in my own career, right? So once I got into product management, I actually could skip 2 levels to get into the 3rd level, right? And that is possible too. So that's why this role is pretty exciting to a lot of people in the industry. And I think it's a fascinating role, right? So let's jump a little bit into PM roles and responsibilities. Now, when when you ask this question to somebody, can you describe what are the roles and responsibilities of a product manager? In fact, if you ask existing PMs, often what you hear is a list of activities that they do and the list of skills that are required for those activities, right? Oh, we do competitive analysis, we do user research, we do requirements management, and then work with designers on product design. We do market analysis, we do packaging, pricing, a lot of those things. But that you can get from anywhere else, right? I'm sure many of you read things, blogs, watch videos, talk to people, so you already can get that. I want to take a slightly different view on understanding the roles and responsibilities, right? So before we jump into that, let's level set a little bit here and structurally understand what is product management, because there is quite a bit of jargons that people use, quite a bit of terminology that people will use, which really doesn't make sense in most of the context, but they think it sounds smart, right? So to me, product management is very simple. It is the art and science of identifying market opportunities and driving the teams to develop compelling, competitive, and profitable products, right? So there are some few keywords here that is really important to note. Product management is the art and science, right? So just because we develop some core product skills doesn't mean that we can be effective in product management, right? So it's a combination of multiple competencies that are required: people skills, influencing, negotiations, strategic thinking, right? And then, of course, the core product skills are needed. And it's an art of how you manage, work with stakeholders, multiple of them, right? And the primary responsibility or goal of product management is to uncover market needs, identify the problems to solve, identify the pain points and challenges to address. Most often, people think product management is a problem-solving role. Product managers are not problem solvers. They are problem managers, right? And hence, resist the temptation to get into solutions before identifying the opportunity to do that, right? To solve the problem. And to drive the team, again, there is a lot of cliches, right? You hear this very popular cliche that product manager is the CEO of the product. Well, not in my experience, right? And I've spent 15 years in product management and product leadership. They are not the CEO of anything. It makes us feel good, certainly. It's a vanity factor to it. But your responsibility is to drive the teams, multiple teams, and I'll talk about what those teams are in a second, right? Towards creating compelling, competitive, and profitable products. Now, you may ask, should it always be profitable? Probably not. It depends on the organization goals, right? So, not-for-profit also has products. Companies that prioritize growth over profitability are also creating products. Many of you know many of those products today. But essentially, profitability is number one on financial aspects. Number three, you're actually building something that will generate those in the future, right? So that's a very important. The reason why I'm spending more than a minute on this is if we don't understand this properly, then all kinds of questions and confusion comes into the picture. Now, here is a metaphor or an analogy, if you will, one of my favorite analogies about how to describe product management, right? And many of you would have seen this character either on YouTube or on TV or wherever, right? This is a orchestra, the conductor of the orchestra. Now, if you watch closely the orchestra, there are a bunch of musicians sitting, right? There are a group of violinists who are experts in violin. There are a group of cellists who play cello. There are a group of pianists who play piano. And then there's this person wearing this black dress, holding a stick in his hand and waving up and down, right? Most of us wonder, what is this person's role here, right? And some of you know that this is a conductor of the orchestra. Now, a conductor of the orchestra is very interesting. This person actually knows how to play every instrument, right? This person knows how to play the violin, cello, bass, piano, but he's not an expert in anything. This person's job is to coordinate these groups of experts that are sitting to create a harmonious orchestra, right? And hence a product manager is very similar, is a master orchestrator of the productizing process, is not an expert in anything, but he or she works with cross-functional teams. And who are these cross-functional teams in the organizations? You have engineering teams, you have testing teams, you have project managers, you have program managers, you have designers, you have sales teams, you have marketing teams, you have partnership teams, you have customers, you have leadership teams. These are all cross-functional teams that the product manager will need to work with and orchestrate the overall productizing process, right? So if there is anything that you take away from this, is this image and this analogy. Right? So let me spend a minute on key responsibilities. Again, I'm not going to delve into right now what are the specific skill sets, competencies, which there are many, and if we have time, we can spend on that. But number one responsibility is not just about building the product right? Most of the time, people say that my job is to make sure that we build the product right so that customers find it useful and beneficial. Well, that's only part of it. The more important part, where product managers spend a lot of time, is building the right product, right? The right product means something that really solves the problem or the pain points or the challenges that your customers have, right? Is the problem real? Is the problem urgent? And then working with the teams to iteratively and incrementally create this product, the product right, using whatever development methodologies organizations may use to do that. Now, for that, the key areas of focus for product managers is customer insighting, identifying the pain points, looking at how urgent they are, how pervasive they are, how big they are, and then coming back and creating some experiments to test and validate many assumptions that the teams are making along the way. The other thing, and this is more important in larger companies, right? You have to find internal champions, because here's an interesting thing about this role. It's actually an individual contributor role until you really become a director of product, right? And that is by design. So nobody reports to you, but you are expected to work with multiple key stakeholders. And for that, you have to identify and cultivate champions for you, your objective, your goals, so that now you can go and get those buy-ins, whether it is executives, whether it is sales teams, whether it is customer support, whether it is engineering, or any of those things, right? And so that's a really, really fascinating and important one. The third one, often product managers find themselves justifying to their other stakeholders and leadership teams whether to do something or not to do something, right? Sometimes you will have to probably build some features or come up with a new idea and new product to take it to market because you identified a compelling need or a problem, or you're actively making a case to actually kill some products, right? And I had to do that, a few years ago, where a product that we spent 12 years in creating and building and taking into the market, now I had to argue for the opposite, which is it's time to shut this down. And these are not easy decisions, right? So based on primarily the organization's objectives, business goals that are there, profitability, revenue, strategic outcomes, all of these things play a very crucial role. So these are three key responsibilities for a PM, right? So the next one, and I think this is super important for everyone to introspect and see, there is a lot of glamour that you see from outside. It is one of the fastest growing paths, career paths, no doubt about it. It is also very highly paying. But the question that we have to ask is this right for me, right? Because it's individual and you have to ask this question to yourself. And I tell you from years of experience in product management and leadership, this role is extremely challenging. There is a lot of chaos, right? And you are expected to make decisions in the context of ambiguity, uncertainty, lack of full information, which can result sometimes in stress, right? Now, not everybody is used to it, but if you really enjoy doing that, or if you were determined in doing that, you can overcome that. But I have seen a lot of people really burn out, right? Because of the nature of that role and responsibility. It's also something which has no authority, as I mentioned, right? In our culture, especially, the notion of success is very interesting, right? How many people report to you is one measure of success that is often used by the society, including your own parents, right? Sometimes. Now, this role is individual contributor by design until you probably get to group product manager or even director, right? So you have to be comfortable with that. If you feel that unless 30 people are reporting to me, I don't feel important, I can't go and talk about it to other people, then this may not be the role for you. You have to reconsider that, right? And as I said, most of the times product managers feel that they are not the CEOs of the product, they are actually the janitors of the product, which means you have to do a lot of cleanup. And in my experience, it says that if a product succeeds, everybody gets to take credit. But if a product fails in the market, product manager is responsible for it. So these are some of the things that people often don't talk about, but I really want to bring those inside view so that you can make an informed decision, right? And the other one, which is very similar to what entrepreneurs have, right, is grit and perseverance. Because there are a lot of times things won't go the way that you want them to go, because there are multiple teams that are working towards that common goal. Some teams have different agendas, different politics and different influence levels and all of that, and that could get pretty disappointing. So if you're a person who's going to give up pretty easily, think again. This requires grit and perseverance, right? So next day morning you need to wake up and say, wow, what a lovely day, let me go and do this thing. So now, while all of that, I'm not trying to scare you here, I'm just trying to bring you a little bit of realism into that particular role, right? Now there are lots of competencies and skills that are there and that are required at different stages and different levels, right? If you're a PM with a title or a senior PM, there are certain skill sets and competencies. If you're a group PM, director of PM, senior director, all of that is determined, right? So let's look at that career path in a second. All of this is absolutely possible to learn and manage, but it requires specific method and direction. Otherwise, it feels like headless chicken running all around, trying to do so many things. At the end of the day, you're exhausted, not knowing what you have contributed and what you have created at the end of the day, right? But there's absolute method. You have to put that method for your own self and then make this happen. So here is how a typical product management career path looks like. It's actually very fascinating for several reasons, right? Now here I'm using titles, right? If you look at the x-axis, on the left side of the x-axis, you see product focus. On the right side, multiple products, which is a product portfolio. On the y-axis, you have tactical or operational below and strategic activities at the top. So this is how typically a career path looks like, right? People start off early stage, 1 year, 2 years as associate product managers. Or these days I'm seeing people with post-graduation management, fresh careers, getting into product analyst roles, right? Product analyst, business analyst, who later change into product owners. Now, if you look at it, the sphere of influence, I call this sphere of influence is what kind of influence do they have on what aspects of product, right? So typically APMs and product owners focus on specific modules of a product, right? They are responsible for modules. A product manager is responsible for multiple features in that particular product. Then you see what we call as product business owners, right? Senior PMs and group PMs typically are responsible for the entire product, not just what you think as features that are being created, put into any product. It could be a physical product, digital product, or any of those. But there are lots of other things that the customer will look at and evaluate your product against, right? In product language, it's called elements of value. It could be warranty, it could be customer support, it could be purchasing process, the complexity. A lot of those things are definitely part of the product, right? You may not be your team may not be the one that is creating it, but if you are a product manager in this quadrant, you are responsible for that. And then you move to the strategic aspects of it, where the director of PM and senior director usually have business responsibilities, right? P&L responsibilities, as we call it. Now you're responsible for the financial success of your product. And that part goes into multiple products. You're handling now not just one, but multiple, and hence you're in a business unit, then move on to the business unit head. Now, an interesting thing that we've seen in the last 6 years is this path is actually leading to two things. Lots of companies, if you look at actually technology companies, the CEOs come from product background, right? You look Facebook, Microsoft, and Amazon, not Amazon, Adobe, and a lot of these things, right? And lots of product managers also start their own companies for a simple reason, because you get exposure to the 360-degree aspect of the business very early in your career, right? And hence you get deeper understanding of it as you go along. So that's essentially how a typical career path looks like based on popular titles that are used by companies. Now, as I mentioned, titles are very creative. Don't just go by the title spot. Here's the fourth one. Let me bring in the hiring manager's perspective here. Let me wear that hat. What are hiring managers looking to hire into these roles, right? Now, there are three categories or three dials, if you will, right? Think of your car, and your car has dashboard dials, right? So think of these three dials. One is domain skills. Second one is functional skills. Third one is leadership skills, right? Domain expertise, interestingly, cannot be taught, right? You have to live in that area, you have to learn, or if you want to move into domain, you have to be, talk to different people, study industry trends on your own. It's hard to know that from others, right? And when I say domain skills, there are both, right? Verticals as well as horizontal. For example, vertical industries, we talk about, insurance, core banking, manufacturing, supply chain. A lot of these things are vertical industries. And there are horizontals, which are applicable in across, industries, security, networking, for example. And today you have data analytics and data science and machine learning and generative AI. These are becoming interesting and important areas that are going to be pervasive and required across the industries, right? So some of those are domain skills. And then you have functional skills. Many of you come from different functional roles, project managers, engineers, designers, program managers. Functional roles are the ones that are required for you to perform that function effectively. So similarly for product management, there are lots of functional skills, right? So customer insighting, competitive analysis, market validation, pricing, packaging, requirements management, product design, agile product management, a lot of these things, right? So these are called functional skills. Now, because many of you come from different backgrounds, a very important point to keep in mind is leverage that strength. Leverage what you have and see how you can repurpose that experience into these roles, whether it is domain or whether it is functional skills, right? A lot of times I hear that I've been a project manager in this company for X years. Now, if I to move into product management, do I have to start below from where I am today? Do I do I have to make some trade-offs and compromises on my compensation and my quality of lifestyle and all of that? I think the way to look at that is project management is an absolutely essential skill even for product managers, right? But it's only one aspect of that overall skill. So if you are able to throw spotlight on that particular area of expertise that you have, then you are already helping the hiring managers convince them that, okay, the risk on this is pretty low, right? Same for domain skills as well. So let's say if you are in Cisco and you understand networking, routers, and switches very well, and if you want to move to Juniper, right, you already are 9 on 10 on that dial of domain skills. But if you want to move to e-commerce and you are interviewing with the e-commerce company, or if you're talking to somebody on that, already I've concluded that you will be probably 6 on 10, right? So hence play to your strengths is super important. Same with functional skills. Now, leadership skills is really, really interesting and important because there are so many leadership skills. It's a misused and abused word. But I bring three very important aspects for every person in product role. Number one, your ability to stand up and tell a compelling story to different stakeholders. Remember, it's a cross-functional team that you are working with now. Second thing is, because nobody reports to you, and yet you have to convince them about your point of view to look at what you are trying to achieve and come on board. It requires lots of negotiations. And in that negotiations, several conflicts arise because each team's goals and objectives may be slightly different. They have their own agenda and focus. But then all of you have to come together into this common goal. And in that context, there is no authority. So if there is no authority, the only thing that will work is influence, right? So if you look at yourself from these three dials, evaluate yourself and see what are the areas that I can leverage, repurpose and repackage, and what are the things that I have gaps in, is an important exercise to do, right? So this is how hiring managers are evaluating. By the way, they are not evaluating on this one or this one or this one. It's a combination of all three. So which means if you're low on any one of these things, the expectation is you are higher on the other two parts of it, right? So hopefully that gives a little bit of slightly different hiring manager's perspective while looking for the roles. Okay, now all of this is nice, Sai, but can you tell me how can we go about making this transition happen, right? Again, so let me bring in this perspective. Most important thing, if one thing that if you were to take away, is build credibility. Now that build credibility is a big word, it's a loaded word, and hence I'll break this down into a few other things: influence building, skill building, experience building, and personal brand building, right? These are not complicated stuff. It's just that they sound complicated. So I'll try and simplify this for you, starting with influence building, right? Most of you do this already in organizations. And if you are not, start today, start tomorrow. It doesn't require any different skills that you already have. Find that customer support manager, find that sales director, find that person, whoever it is that is closest to the customers. Build a little bit of rapport with them and understand what is the voice of the customer, which means what are you, your team, or whoever is closest to that customer is hearing about the product, about the problems, about the challenges, about what they are not able to get done. And then you be the voice of that customer into your current team, right? You don't have to become a product manager to do this. You can do this in project management. You can do this in program management. You can do this in testing. You already do this as a QA engineer, right? You're wearing a hat of a customer and trying to see if the functionality that is available will work or not. Now you be the ambassador of this customer. All of you can do this today without actually wearing the title of a product manager. The second tip is make friends with this person, right? It is very critical. And this is something that I learned the hard way. Especially sales folks come with a very interesting perspective. They also know other aspects of customers, not just about the challenges and the problems that they have in the workflows, but whether it is in terms of purchasing complexity, whether it is in terms of budgets, whether it is in terms of who is actually the influencer in the customer to make the decision, right? So it's really important to make that connect with somebody outside your team. I know one of you messaged that you are in sales, and I'm sure you can attest to the fact that you actually can bring a very different perspective than what engineers and product managers can bring about the product, right? So all of you can do this today. It's just that we feel hesitant, shy, and we feel reluctant to go and ask a stranger or bring a conversation with that. But that's anyway required in senior roles, in leadership roles, in product roles, right? So keep that in mind. The other thing is master stakeholder management. What this means is, now a lot of people dismiss this saying that politically you have to be political, right? Now there is no organization in the world that at least I know of, which is not political, right? Politics is actually in a way thriving because of competing agendas. Different people come with different agendas and they want to achieve that. And that's how it is. Even in the real world politics, it's exactly the same. But your job is not to necessarily play that. Your job is to necessarily to understand that dynamics. That's why we call this organizational savviness, which means in your org chart, who are the key influencers? What do they value? What do they appreciate? What they don't like is really important for you to understand this, right? And there are many ways to do it, right? It doesn't have to be in all hands meetings or quarterly meetings, right? So you can seek for a 10-minute meeting with anyone in the organization. I doubt if they will refuse it. Maybe they'll refuse it twice or thrice. But if you make a compelling case, everybody in your organization can give you 10 minutes to talk to you. And you can ask and find out these things, right? So those are three areas in influence buildings. Next is skill building. right? Now, this is where a lot of folks jump in right away, because we believe that to get to a next role, to get to that role that we want to be, what I'm lacking is a set of skills. Now, that may be true, but this alone will not help you get there. So what are these skills and how do you do these things? Right? Remember, this is a highly cross-functional role, which means your ability to understand design, your ability to understand engineering, your ability to understand marketing, sales, partnerships becomes very crucial, just like the conductor of the orchestra. So hence, what do we call these cross-functional competencies, right? So customer context, business context, innovation context, market context, process context, and leadership context, right? So these can be categorized under these contexts. Now, I won't get into details of each of these things. A very quick one-liner for each. Customer context is ability and area and competencies for you to know, is the problem real? Is the problem urgent? Right? And there are lots of skills and competencies that are required for you to be able to come with that. Business context is, what business model are we going to take this product or offering to that market? Who are we competing with? What are the strengths that we have as the organization that we are going to use to compete in that market, which is basically strategy, right? And what aspect of the business model are we going to be different than the competitor? Then you have innovation context. For people who come from engineering, they're already doing this, they're already familiar with this, which is creating products and features and capabilities that are better, faster, cheaper, and cooler than many other things. So that is innovation context. Market context, really important area for product managers. One simple question, difficult question to answer. Is the problem worth solving? Because it's going to take time, money, resources to build what you're going to build. Is it worth building? Is there enough opportunity in the market to actually do this? And that is a strategic question, a strategic area, right? So we already talked about leadership process. Many of you know this. So these are cross-functional competencies that are required. Again, it's important to know that every product manager doesn't need to know all of these things. At different levels, some of these things will become very important, right? At a product manager PM title level, customer context and market context are super important. At senior PM, group and director PM, you need to add now in terms of business context and leadership context, right? Innovation context is important across all. So that's a critical thing to remember. Now, it is not just important to actually learn these things, right? So most of the people think that, oh, these are the areas that I have gaps in. Let me go join some course. Let me learn these things. Everybody is saying they will teach you this, they will teach you that. This is the topic, this is the course coverage. Lots of people can do that, right? But as I mentioned, just having a logo is proof of knowledge. What is required from a hiring, from a transition perspective, is proof of skill. And that proof of skill cannot come from some certificate, some degree or anything. It has to come from demonstration of skills. How do you demonstrate the skills that you've learned and build what we call as personal brands, right? Experience building. Now, this is where for people who come from different other functional roles, it's a little challenging to get into. The first and most important aspect is to develop product vocabulary, right? If you're not developing the product vocabulary and using it to other people, you are not sending the right signal. If you use the product vocabulary, even if you really don't understand that much of it, people at least think that, oh, this person knows what he's talking about, right? So vocabulary is absolutely important to develop. The other way is, and the reason why this is important is I often get this question from people saying that, look, it's a chicken and egg situation. How do I do the product management activities without getting into product management role? But who will give me product management role without doing these activities, right? So it's kind of a chicken and egg. Now, there is an easy way to break this logjam, if you will. And these are the steps. Work with the current product manager, shadow them, understand, learn, and actively participate and show to other people that you know what you are doing. You can do this if given an opportunity. And the third one, I see this very common these days, is people raise their hands. I have seen people with 25 years work experience come to me and say, I want to spend some time helping you in this particular area. I believe I know how to do market analysis and competitive analysis. I'm willing to spend few hours doing that for you. And I'm a volunteer. You don't have to pay me. You are giving me the opportunity to actually apply what I have learned in competitive analysis and create something for you that will be helpful. This is a fantastic way. And it's not just for interns, right? This is a common mistake people think. It's even for people with 10 years, 12 years experience to move into these roles. It gives you a taste of what this role is like. Do you enjoy it? Do you like it? And all of that, right? And the fourth one is, as you're going through this, there are lots of doubts and questions and blind spots that you will have to overcome. Now, find a mentor, find a coach who can help you guide. It's not easy, but if you have, my career trajectory is dramatically changed because I was fortunate enough to get some really good mentors, right? So get into an environment where you have access to mentors and coaches, right? So these are the things to get foot in the door. And the last one is personal brand building. Now, this is not from a marketing standpoint, right? If you look at it, lots of functional roles do this. People in engineering, they do this thing by GitHub projects. They create a work on certain projects, publish those projects on GitHub, share that everywhere. Why? It demonstrates that you have the abilities to do it. Designers do it all the time. Marketers do it. So why not product? Right? Now, the question is, how do I do this? There are lots and lots of ways, which I don't have time to get into. But simply put, can you write a 200-word article or a blog post on a specific topic that involves a specific area of product management and share your perspective? You can publish this on LinkedIn, tag 100 people and say, hey, look, what do you think? Or you can do a 2-minute YouTube video, or you can become a speaker. You can become a moderator. You can become panelist. There are dozens of ways how you can actually signal to the world that you not only know product management skills, but you actually can do it, and hence you're ready, right? So that's the way to approach this, as opposed to spending time on decorating your resume. Now, I'm actually quite opposed to that approach, because I'll tell you why. These days, everybody's resumes look awesome. Everybody is decorating their resumes with lots and lots of keywords. And many of you know what happens when you put keywords. The application tracking systems are filtering applications based on keywords. So you are competing with hundreds of other people who are taking the same approach. And if you continue to take that, you won't even probably get a thank you email because you've submitted your resume, which is unfortunate, because then you will incorrectly conclude that your profile is not good. Hence, a very different approach, very popular approach, and a proven approach, right? Signal to the world. Before you ask for that role, signal to that world that you have the abilities to do it. Of course, after developing the knowledge and skills is what you can do. Right? So let me outline these steps for you as a summary and closure. Number one, pick the career direction. Is this right for you? Evaluate for yourself, or ask somebody to help you with. Identify what strengths you want to leverage. You can leverage from your current experience of project managers, engineers, designers, sales, marketing, or whatever. And what are the gaps? And once you identify those, put a plan on how you're going to bridge those gaps. And this is where many people say, oh, maybe this program will help me. Maybe that certificate program will help me. This degree will help me, right? Evaluate that based on other parameters that I mentioned. Once that is done, as you are learning these skills, put yourself into situations where you are showcasing, you're demonstrating what you are building, right? And if you have access to a very strong network of people who have gone through the same journey as you have gone through, they are more likely to help you, right? Network building is not about sending a LinkedIn connection request, right? That is probably the worst form of networking in my view. Network building is asking a simple question to the other person. How can I help you? Here is what I have. Here is what I can do. Can I help you with something? That's the starting of that amazing relationship, right? So if you have access to that network, then absolutely fantastic. Now, if the hiring managers look at your portfolio before they look at your resume, then you have a very high chance of getting a foot in the door, at least sitting down for that interview, right? Then, of course, preparing for that interviews and cracking those and negotiating the offers, all of that comes. So this is kind of a systematic approach that I felt it works for lots of people based on my personal experience, and hence I thought I'll share this. Okay, so I'll stop now and see if you have any questions. There are a bunch of them. I see that. So again, the reason why I took more time is hopefully what we covered should answer quite a number of questions. But let me scan through and see if there are something that we didn't cover. Right? Software engineer with 8 years experience. How do I project myself? I hope you got the answer. I've worked in startups, 0 to 1. Excellent. I attended few interview. I failed to convince them. Demonstrate skills. So that demonstration is actually a way to de-risk a lot of things for the hiring managers before you sit down in front of the interview, right? So maybe you want to try doing that before you get a foot in the door. And if you believe that there are gaps in how do I think about these questions, you should definitely get some mentoring and coaching, right? So I do a lot of these things, asking some very weird questions, right? The question, one of my favorite question is, how many tennis balls can you fit in a school bus? There is no right answer to it. But I'm not looking for a right answer. I'm looking for your thinking. I'm looking for your mindset. I'm looking, what kind of questions are you going to ask me to take a methodical approach to arrive at some answer, right? Another favorite question of mine in interviews in Bangalore was, how many people do you think drink beer in Bangalore? Tell me quantify that opportunity for me, right? So these are weird questions for normal people, from other roles, but there is method to that madness. Okay, researcher, clinician, and I've recently pivoted to product. Excellent. Most jobs seem to want. So let me address this one very important question. I always say that if I get a rupee for every time somebody asks me this question, I can retire in some beach resort, right? Which is, are technology skills required or a prerequisite for me to become a product manager? When I say technology, I'm mostly talking about IT, programming, coding, right? Now, the answer is a little nuanced. IT, technology, programming, coding skills are not really required if you are not in a company that is leveraging technology to build products, which means technology is a core component. What is really important in there is customer centricity, as we talked about customer context, market context, and business context. Now, there are two areas where, two aspects where having technology or IT skills are an advantage. Number one, when your actually customers are technical. Lots of companies are building APIs. API is a technical thing. Who are your customers? Your customers are developers. So if your customers are technical, the expectation is that you should understand them better, and hence you should know IT and technology a little better. Right? The other aspect where IT and technology comes is, it's very important for product manager to establish credibility with the cross-functional teams and especially engineering teams. So if you come with some IT and technology background, it's relatively easier to establish that relationship. But it is not. In my experience, it is not at all a mandatory thing. If you are going to a company that builds technology products, the expectation is, of course, if you don't understand technology, how to leverage that as a tool to build the products that you're building, then you're not really doing that role, right? In fact, I've hired a pianist as a product manager. Why? Because I already had 5 people who understand telecommunications who are from engineering background. I don't need the 6th person doing the same thing, right? So this is a really important question that many of you have. And the way I look at it is highlight your strengths. Remember, customer context, market context, business context, and your domain. If you are strong in that, there are other people who can bring in the technology context. Okay, good. So one last question maybe we'll take and pause. Dowell UX Lab Thomas is a global management consulting and use. Okay, great. I'm just looking for your question here. Oh, no. So that's not a question. That's some promotion. That's a plug. Okay, so I guess I did a really quick scan and tried to answer as many questions as I could. Happy to connect with you on LinkedIn and probably answer some of those if you have. But hopefully your 1 hour is worth it. I value all your time very highly. I value my time very highly. So I hope this 1 hour before and after is very different, right? So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sai. Thank you for that session. I'm sure everyone's gotten some great insights to take away and start their transition journey. Thank you so much for being here.
Good night.
Good night. To all our attendees too, thank you for being here. If I could just request you to scan the QR code on the screen and leave any feedback or reviews or questions so that we can get back to you, I'd greatly appreciate it. I will wait here for a few seconds so that you can scan the QR codes. That's it, guys. That's the end of the session. Thank you for joining in. I'm sure you've had a fruitful session and are taking away some great insights. And we'll get started on your transitioning journey into product management.